Welcome to the show, Deborah. I am very excited to have you here to talk to us about LinkedIn and inclusion and lots of other things today. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me on, Erica. I am super excited too.
Good. So your tag, I'm going to call it a tagline, but when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, I don't know if you consider it a tagline, but it says humanizing brands, connecting people. And I feel like there's a story behind that tagline, maybe. But can you share with us how you ended up on that tagline and being the LinkedIn black belts and kind of, how'd you get here?
Absolutely. Well, I came from a 20-year corporate marketing background. So around 45, I decided that I'm kind of bored with what I'm doing, and I decided to explore what else there was out there for me. So I had quite a good amount of success in the corporate world, and of course it was helping the companies to build brand awareness, but I wanted to do it on a different level. So I discovered this entire world online of business owners who are brilliant at what they do, but they're just not that great at marketing what they do. So of course I came online. I had all the different things that happen when you first come into a space that's unknown to you, imposter syndrome, all of that other stuff. And I started to share from a point of what I'm used to, which is that corporate speak, right? So, people were enjoying my content, but it didn't hit me what I was doing until one day someone said, well, you're online now, you can take off your pearls.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. I've never necessarily worn pearls, but I got it. So
that's a little bit of genius right there. You can take off your pearls. Okay.
Exactly. It's not even about, this whole formal way of approaching people. It's about being that friend and having conversations like you would with your friends, because naturally people gravitate towards people they find a connection with, right?
Yeah.
That's how you humanize your brand, and obviously connecting people is that way. It's done that way too. So this LinkedIn Black Belt title was assigned to me because if we think about, and like I mentioned, imposter syndrome, all of that stuff hit me. I just know that I'm sharing what I know and how things work, but I don't necessarily, at least in the past, I didn't necessarily see myself as an expert. So I would hear people say different things like, you are the queen of LinkedIn with the content I was sharing, and you're the LinkedIn black belt, like you have this black belt on LinkedIn. And I was like, that actually, I like that, it sticks. Yeah, I think everyone should, especially when we think about LinkedIn, everyone should have this little aspect that they, like a tagline or a name that people remind them from, because it's easier to relate that way.
Yeah, and we'll get into this more, but when somebody searches for you, like your profile URL is linkedin.com/LinkedIn Black Belt.
Right, yeah.
As opposed to your name.
Exactly. There's a slight shift though, because LinkedIn doesn't allow you to use their intellectual property, which makes sense as it. So it's the link black belt. But if someone searches hashtag the LinkedIn black belt anywhere, Google or through anything, they're going to find me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So good. And you have your MBA. So you had like a very businessy background, had this corporate career. And then how long ago was it that you transitioned to being
about 6 years ago?
6 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, 6 years ago.
Okay.
So it took me about a year to figure out that although I was connecting with people, they wanted to know more about me versus my content.
And then you took off the pearls.
I took off the pearls. I took off the pearls after someone told me to take off the pearls. Yeah. And it's been good since then.
Was there a sense for you that you wanted to take off your pearls, but something was holding you back from doing that? Or was it more like, this is a strategy you knew? Was this very corporate speak? I'm curious if there was anything holding you back and that person kind of gave you permission, or if you just hadn't seen it that way.
Right. It's interesting, right? Yeah, I almost didn't even see it that way. I was just stepping into what I was used to, because this is like, this is the new version of my 9 to 5. So as I'm having conversations with business people, this is how we talk about things. But these are still just, your regular everyday people, not necessarily, your corporate business people. So I think in a way it gave me permission, but like I said, I didn't know that I was doing that. And I didn't realize that because everyone's always, especially as a speaker. So I'll tell you the story too of how I started speaking, and they always tell you there, you can't say and you can't say certain things. So I just thought it was an unwritten language that you couldn't use online. So yeah, that was my permission.
Love it. Okay. So in 2019, we're recording this in 2020, you did LinkedIn assessments for over 800 executives and founders.
Right.
And what you found was, and I'm quoting directly from your LinkedIn profile, is that they see value in LinkedIn, but they don't know how to optimize it to unlock opportunities. So to my ear, that sounds sort of like a classic no-do gap, like KNOW, like you
Right.
know something, but you can't or aren't, maybe because you need a permission slip
Right.
to do something. So you were doing everything there is to do on LinkedIn because you were ranked in the top 1% of LinkedIn users.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to dive into like the specifics of how to optimize it, but I'm curious, one, why do you think that no do gap exists? Like if folks can see it and know that there are opportunities, what's holding them back?
Well, I think it's more about similar to what I had. I was speaking with the CMO this morning, and although they want to build their personal brand and they know it's important, they don't want to be too casual. So when I said to her, users will connect with you with your content when you're taking it from a casual standpoint, I think her definition of casual was a lot different than what I see as casual. So then she pointed out someone who is what we consider an influencer in her market. I always say, we have influencers all over social media. It's not necessarily about who you think is an influencer for you, but who does your audience see as an influencer. So she pointed that out to me today, and she said, well, if you look at her content, it's more formal. She's also former president of a very large Fortune 500 company, so she has a lot of pull. So we went through her content, and I said, actually, she is very casual. You can see there's 3 main concepts that she speaks about, and it's about helping young women see that you can have opportunities, and no matter what, nothing will hold you back from the opportunities you desire. Another thing that we saw about this person who she thought was more formal, that she's definitely a feminist. She shares books that she's reading, and it had the word feminist in the title. So, to me, that's casual. I'm having conversations with my friends. This is the latest book I'm reading, and this is the reason why I like the book. So she was able to relax a little bit because she said, okay, it is something that I discuss every day with friends, but I didn't know I could use it on LinkedIn. So it's like you said, it's more the permission based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you use the word relaxed, which is, you can sort of see people go like, oh, I can do this. That's not so scary. That's easier, right? That's like more of a path of least resistance.
Right,
I don't know. I think
exactly.
there's a tendency to build up things on social media because so many folks are doing it in a way that's like kind of highly produced and everything's perfect. And there's a little bit of tension, between this idea of highly produced, everything that's perfect, and like people want you to actually be human.
Right.
And particularly for executives, of a certain age, I think the Zoomers and millennials get this a bit more intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Gen Xer. I think we struggle a bit more with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there used to be those brighter lines between personal and professional. And I think it's part of the reason I find LinkedIn really interesting, which is it does sort of call you to think about how you want to show up and what it means to be professional yet human, and how are you going to balance all those things.
Right.
So how's LinkedIn different? Help us think about and understand, how is LinkedIn different than other social media platforms?
Well, when you think about LinkedIn, how it was designed and why it was designed, obviously it's no longer just about resumes and recruiters, but it was designed to be an online platform for networking. So that's all that is done. When you go to Facebook, yes, there's aspects of Facebook that you're using for business, but most people who are using Facebook, they connected for people for a reason. So they connected to them to see, maybe let's see how the kids are doing, and
Yeah.
you got married, we can see some wedding photos, things like that. But when we go onto LinkedIn, it's very specific to, this is where I'm going to go to not only share my thought leadership, but to connect with the people who are looking for the type of business that I have. An aspect of that too, when we kind of like think about LinkedIn, obviously it's not necessarily about showing pictures of your kids, but now with the pandemic, things have changed. So, we have people who are graduating, they've spent like, whether years in medical school or parents with their kids with,
Yeah, yeah.
4 years in college, and they can't celebrate. So now it's kind of cool that they can share with their colleagues at work through LinkedIn that look at what my child has achieved, and they get a ton of engagement from
Oh,
that.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it gives me the chills just talking about it, because I can't imagine being a parent that you've worked that hard to like put your kids through school and they can't even have a graduation ceremony, like a traditional one.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm a teaching professor at the University of Washington, and so I teach undergrad, but I teach a course for our second year students, or capstone. So I get to know them deeply because it's
Right.
a 6-month deal. And we didn't, they didn't get to walk. And, the Evans School, which is where I work, did a wonderful job with an online version of that, but
Right.
it's not the same.
Yeah.
And especially for first generation students, like, oh gosh, just to not have that moment was
Right.
heartbreaking. That was
Oh yeah.
heartbreaking.
Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen in the future, right? We don't know, but this was their moment. So
This
yeah.
was their moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing now that we know is that we don't know. So if ever there was a question mark about that, I think now there's no more question mark about that,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So you touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious if you can give us a little more insight into what holds people back. So specific to thought leadership, which is one way to use LinkedIn.
Mhm.
What holds people back from sharing their thought leadership on LinkedIn? I mean, maybe in general, what holds people back, if you have opinions about that, and then specifically on LinkedIn, what holds people
Yeah,
back?
yeah. Definitely it's the fear of saying or doing the wrong things, right?
Mm,
And it depends. There's a piece of it, you're doing it for your own personal brand, and then you're also doing it to stand out within your company. So when we think about whether nonprofit or for profit, there are certain things in certain industries that you just cannot say. So what if you mess up? What if that audience member that's been watching you for a while that you're connected with doesn't necessarily agree with everything that you share? So I think those are the main things that will stop people from doing it, because they just don't want to mess up. Specifically on LinkedIn, now it's about that brand voice. What voice do I want for LinkedIn? Like who? And to me, it's like it's your voice. It's who you are
voice.
naturally.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest question I get, and
Oh, interesting.
yeah, it's the biggest question I get, that I don't know how to share my voice on LinkedIn, and it's the whole preconceived notion of what LinkedIn is.
Are these people who are comfortable or are sharing their thought leadership on other platforms, and then they like get stuck when they're trying to train? Oh, that's fascinating.
On Twitter, they have no problem, and I've 2 weeks ago, I spoke to at least 20 executives, between executives, founders, different people, someone from Facebook, someone from Indeed, different companies, just for my own research, something I was doing. And they told me they have no problem sharing their thoughts on Twitter. They almost don't feel tied to their organization through Twitter, but on LinkedIn they do. I was like, wow,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding this, because from a psychology perspective, this is fascinating, which
right.
is there's something about Twitter that feels like kind of more their own, and like
Mhm.
they won't mess up on behalf of the company. Whereas in the environment of LinkedIn, that feels very tied to their company or organization, and therefore they're worried about messing up.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Almost to, and they didn't mention this, but I almost wonder, maybe because they have more colleagues who are on LinkedIn, because Twitter is very complicated. I use that in the beginning of my online career, but it's complicated, so people stay away. But LinkedIn, once you get into it, it's a flow, right?
Yeah, but
And
Twitter's noisy.
noisy. Yeah, it's noisy and it's fast, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So that is, yeah, it's fascinating. I love human psychology, and it's an interesting thing to even think about.
Yes. Okay. So you have an amazing LinkedIn profile, clearly. Do you mind if we walk through your LinkedIn profile and you can like explain to us what's going on?
Yeah,
I kind of fancy myself a decently good LinkedIn user, clearly
yeah.
not a black belt. And I was like, I wonder why she does that. I wonder why she does that. So,
Right.
okay, can we take a look? I'm going to share my screen for folks who are watching on video.
Or
Okay. Okie doke. Here we are. And
okay.
again, calling attention to the fact that I put in your name and then it takes me to the linked black belt.
Right. So the very first thing, if we want to start with the URL, if you when you first join LinkedIn, what's going to happen? It does linkedin.com/IN, and it has your, like, if your first and last name, it has a dash in between and then a whole bunch of numbers after that. In order to kind of personalize your brand, you want to switch that to something specific, but it's something that you pretty much use throughout social media. So it can be your first and last name, but something that's very unique to you. If your name is a pretty popular name like Christian Smith or something like that, then you may have to find something else, but you don't want people to search for you and then they find about 30 different people with the same name because now you've lost them, right?
Right, right.
So that's where to start. Now I can tell you about 2 weeks ago, I had a completely different banner image,
Okay.
but the banner image was more about, it was words, it was different words that I do. So it was, gain your competitive advantage, LinkedIn training. This time I decided, because I want to focus more on doing, it's virtual training at this point, but virtual training and speaking engagement. So the image pretty much
Yep.
shows this is exactly what I do and I've done it for others in the past. That's your social proof. So if you have something that you've done in the past and you want to position yourself as an expert in that space, let that banner image be the place you put it, because you have about 3 seconds for someone when they come to your profile to make a decision whether they want to go further or not.
Okay. 3 seconds. It's not
Yeah,
a lot
three
of time.
seconds.
It's high bar. One thing okay, so that even your name, Deborah Ashley, MBA, and then in parentheses, elevate and scale, close
Hmm.
paren for our podcast listeners, and then dash marketing strategy. So not just your name, like you were packing a lot into this sort of title area.
Right. So what's going to happen? Part of the reason, when you think about LinkedIn in itself, just like Google is a search engine, LinkedIn is a search engine. So at any given point, someone's going to they'll search for marketing strategist or marketing strategy, New York, anything else, and you want to make sure that your name comes up on top. So you're putting that, not everyone has to do it this way, but you want to at least put that, what you do in your headline and your about section. But let's go into how I set up my name. So when we click on that pencil, that's pretty much how to update your name. I have my first and last name in my first name column, and I have marketing strategy in my last name column.
Oh.
So when I engage in content, when I'm in other people's, so we're thinking about a networking event. When I start having conversations and I enter a conversation that's already taken place in someone else's feed, people will automatically see what I do. They don't have to guess just by my name.
Got it. Yeah.
And they may get curious, and then that's when the whole goal is to lead people back to your profile. Your profile is kind of like the funnel.
And so I'm hearing two things just in the name section. One is to help with search engine optimization.
Mm-hmm.
And then also to like take away any uncertainty somebody might have about what you want to be known for.
Right. Yeah. Because
Okay. And then underneath it, you have helping leaders and brands stand out as industry experts to win new business. And then this very kind of groovy forward arrow linked in marketing strategist, consultant, and trainer, another groovy arrow, and then 20 plus years brand building. I've never
all
seen a groovy arrow.
it's under you just do arrow character and you can find it on Google on any of those.
I love it.
So you can do like a podcast mic.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah. So you can do mic emoji and then you'll find it in Google. So with the headline area, it's really about, so when you engage, same thing when you're engaging in someone else's feed, because more than anything, you're going to get connected to more people when you engage with others.
Yeah, yeah.
Typically, what they see, first of all, is helping leaders and brands stand out. Everything else will be cut off when I'm engaging on someone's post. So what's going to happen now? They're going to get curious again, because human nature makes people get curious. And the way to do it is to make sure that you're leaving very relevant remarks. You see people say cool and thank you on the post. It doesn't make you stand out. But if you share something that's very relevant, then it's going to make you really stand out.
So I just scrolled down to see your activity,
Mm-hmm.
just so that folks have a little example.
That one, yeah, I think the one with 100 videos will be a good one to share, because we
100
started having
videos. Oh,
conversation.
here we go.
If you click on, yeah.
Oh, what I learned from posting 100 LinkedIn videos. Okay, and this is a Dr. Brian Harmon. And
Yeah. And if you
so,
scroll down to my comment, hopefully it's right on top.
yep,
There
it
we are.
is.
Yeah. So if you notice, you see right underneath my name?
Yep. Okay,
And,
great. Yeah.
yeah.
So what folks are seeing is Deborrah Ashley, MBA, and then helping leaders and brands stand out as industry experts to win new busy. Dot, dot,
Right.
dot.
So
So really 6 to 7 words.
if that's their goal, they will take a look at my profile. Plus, I also engage the person who
Yeah.
shared the comment by asking him a question. And I'm sure other people had that question, they just didn't ask.
So your question was, you said amazing accomplishment, Dr. Brian Harmon. What app did you use to make this? He said Canva. You said thank you. I should have known that. So it's a conversation. It's human.
Right.
It's human.
I'm at a networking event online and we're having a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go back to your amazing profile. Here we are. So there's some stuff that is put in there. Okay, let's talk about your about section.
Sure. So your goal, especially with the very first line of your about section, because we at this point have an attention of a gnat or a mosquito. The whole goal of that very first line, because before you open this, you're only able to see the first 2 lines. The goal is to get other people to read the next line, and doing that, they have to open it. So now you're going to call attention to something very specific that they're either concerned about or that they have a question about. You may have to refresh in order to see that, it's on the first 2 lines. Yeah.
So asking a question, because our brains are hardwired to want to answer questions, is probably a good way. But it sounds like the job of this first sentence is to get people to click the more button and then read the rest of it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now I'm almost telling them that this is the reason you're going to want to listen to me. And people are always going to be intrigued by the fact that I have done all of those LinkedIn assessments. They want to know what it would mean to them and what can they do to fix their own profile, because that's kind of like where it starts.
Yeah. And then you go through, I mean, you make it easy, right? As a consultant, here's all these things. As a trainer, here's all these things.
Right.
My expertise is your secret weapon.
Precisely.
Proof points. My 25 plus years of experience include crafting innovative campaigns for brands and steering marketing development for startups across a broad range of industries.
Right.
And then next steps. So I've never seen this before. Talk to us about this. This is your 4th bullet. Next steps.
So next steps, I just want them to self-select. Some people may not need the full consulting with me. They just want their profile to be overhauled. Because and when we think about, the CEOs or executives, they don't necessarily use LinkedIn, but their profile has not been changed in 10 years.
Right.
So their teams may say, okay, and I'm pretty much letting them know specifically, this is exactly what I do.
Right.
And then this is how you can connect with me.
So for listeners, under next steps, it says, I focus on a holistic approach to marketing born from a place of client obsession, which is like, you're like, well, I want her to obsess about me. That sounds fantastic. Authenticity and integrity. If this is you, let's chat. And then you have 3 calls to action so they can kind of choose their own adventure. Inquiry for consulting, contact information, LinkedIn profile overhaul, contact information, and then speaking and training requests.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I shared that information about, this is who I want to work with, this is who I don't want to work with. So you get to self-select. If you're the type of organization or the type of business that everything's about sales, as soon as we connect, you want to pitch me in your inbox, then I can't help you, because that's not what I do. So I want to be very clear about the type of people I help, because I've made the mistake earlier on taking on the wrong clients, and they ended up being nice
Yes.
clients. So
Yeah. Because I've been consulting for so long, I get questions, right, from folks who are just getting into the field. I'm sure you do too. And my biggest piece of advice is to just remind yourself that your no's are as important as probably more important than your yeses, your early yeses, because
absolutely.
it's, for a lot of people, it's going to be referral and word of mouth. And so if you take on a project, and this makes total sense, especially now we're all a bit worried. So you'll take on work that isn't necessarily it's work you can do, but it's not the work you want to do. Well, then if you do a great job, then you're getting referred for work that you don't actually want to do. So as
Absolutely right.
hard as those early no's are, they are so important.
Yeah,
You will get the projects you want faster if you can be brave enough to say no. Oh,
absolutely.
that's tough though. Okay, and then they have the featured stuff, which is automatic. Um, Now, if we go under experience, the name of your company, which we haven't mentioned next, is Thrive Marketing. Did I say
Mhm.
that right?
You did. So that's great.
Thank you.
More people say something different. I'm amazed. Thank you.
Thrive Marketing. I like the way it looks. I like the way it sounds. I was like, oh, good, that's fun. And then under this also, you, again, just the way you have this, it's like, yet again, I know exactly what you are offering: LinkedIn strategy consulting, employee profile overhaul, strategic partnerships. Um,
All keywords. And what I'm doing there, I'm putting keywords in.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have, is this based on not some sort of timeline, but you have these sub bullets underneath Thrive.
Right. So I typically share this in my workshops. If you are looking to position yourself as a speaker, you should have a specific, separate, almost like a job experience area that just says you're a speaker. Then you're going to outline what you speak about, where you've spoken before, even links to if you've been on podcasts. So when someone searches for a speaker, your keywords will now come up.
Okay. And that's exactly what you've done here. Of course. LinkedIn speaker, corporate trainer. And those are all keywords, I'm guessing.
That they would search.
Okay.
If you
Mm-hmm.
want to go up a few bumps, I'm going to show you something that, well, you may not see it on your end, actually, you won't. Right? You'll see it on your profile. You know where it says the number of searches this past week? It's really the past 7 days.
Right. So it's
Private
usually, yeah.
That's where typically you want that number to be over 500. That means your profile is fully optimized.
Okay.
Yeah.
500.
Yeah. So I can tell you, let me check on my phone. I have a little over 1,000 searches based on my skill set this past week. So if you click that area, you can see what company those people are working at that did the search, what their titles were, and what specific keywords they searched for to find you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think in general, I show up in maybe 100. So clearly I have a long ways to go. Lots of opportunity.
Yeah, lots
for
of
improvement.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's what a great benchmarking thing. Okay. So listeners, if you're listening, when you look at your LinkedIn profile and you're logged in as you, if you're looking at it, it would be over here on the side, on the left-hand side. And it's going to tell you how many searches you showed up in that. So you said per week, we want to be aiming for 500. That means we're fully optimized.
Yeah, it should at least 500. So it's going to say your private dashboard, typically right underneath the feature area.
Okay.
A private dashboard, and all you have to do is click it. And sometimes, like initially when I first started doing this, it would have so many random keywords like fitness and coach, and I said to myself, no, that's not where you're showing up. So you just have to play around with it. Marketing is all about testing what works and tweaking and then moving forward with it.
Experiment.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else that you want to draw attention to that the neophytes among us may not know that you have done on your profile?
One thing that's going to be super important, your testimonial area, that's right at the very bottom. You want to make sure that you have at least 2 newer relevant testimonials within the past 6 months. People care about that a lot more than they care about the skills area, because anyone can check off your skills, right?
Right.
It's the people that you've either worked with or you've either impacted to leave you a specific testimonial. And when I always, share about testimonials or not, oh, Erica is an amazing person. She did a great job. I love her podcast. It's more about before I found Erica online, this is where I was. Now that I have listened to her podcast and I've gained her insight, this is what the result of what has happened based on our work together.
So the transformation that has occurred.
Absolutely.
Now,
Yeah.
you don't have to answer this necessarily, but if you want to, I'm curious.
Okay.
Do you write a proposed testimonial and then have folks edit, or do you just let them freeform?
So two options. So what I'll say, and I share this anyway, I will initially, it depends on who the person is. I'll initially say, like, for example, hey, Michelle, I'd love for you to write a testimonial about the workshop that you attended, that I hosted. Specifically, I'd love to for you to share, where you were in the process before, what you're doing now, and what result has happened since our work together.
Got it. Okay. So a little like leading the horse to the water.
Absolutely. If I don't hear from them in 3 days, I will then reach out and say, and people get busy, so maybe there's something else going on. I say, hey, if you're busy, if you want, I can kind of share something that someone else has written, and you can take from that and insert what you need.
Oh, okay. All right. So like a double down strategy, but initially just like, hey, this is generally what I would like, and then helping them move towards something with more specifics in the follow-up.
Right. Because a lot of times, when you think about it, it's not even that they don't want to write you a profile.
Yeah.
Now it's always about, what if I say I don't want to mess up, or I don't even know how to put into words, especially if I have a lot of people who have very analytical backgrounds, your engineers and your attorneys. And they make it very formal versus very personal. So that's why I kind of have to coach them a little bit, and it's completely okay.
Yeah, back to that theme of being human.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point.
That was fun, a mini class in between.
It was like a mini class. I loved it. Thank you. I learned a ton, as I knew I would. So we've talked a lot about LinkedIn from the personal perspective, like a personal LinkedIn profile. Right. I want to transition so that you can share with listeners and viewers kind of how to think about it from like a company or organization perspectives.
That's wonderful. So, okay, obviously, let's focus kind of on the nonprofit area. I identified a few people who are doing it excellently.
Oh, good.
Sorry?
I just said good.
Yay. Okay.
Yay.
Sorry. Okay. I'll do that. I identified those people who are doing it a great job. Obviously, we already know the American Heart Associations of the world. They have a team that's going to do. They're going to do it an amazing way. But I want to share what's making it amazing for them. Another group, the ICF, International Coach Federation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They also have obviously a great base on LinkedIn. So I'm surprised. I didn't realize they were on LinkedIn too, but I can identify some of the things that they're doing very well. So when we think about the content they're putting out, you want to use obviously your company page, but you also want to use the personal page and build brand ambassadors. So your brand ambassadors could be your volunteers, they could be your current employees, and they can be, potentially your members. Obviously, it has to be someone who's already on LinkedIn. So if we are using brand ambassadors, the first thing that we want to focus on is making sure that their LinkedIn profile is optimized. Okay. Because no matter what, even if they now share content from the company page, where a lot of the content should originate, they're sharing it to their feed, people will get interested in what they're saying, and they will go right back to their profile. The profile doesn't necessarily have to speak to, like, for example, the American Heart Association. It doesn't have to speak to their vision and mission, but it should at least align if they call themselves volunteers. So another piece of the puzzle would be
are you just to make sure I'm tracking, like the Heart Association might reach out to their volunteers, which I would guess they have a lot, and say, do they give them tips like, hey, here are 3 things that you could do to really help us spread the word, like 3 changes on your LinkedIn profile or something like that?
Yeah, they could do that. Well, I wouldn't say to see. I would more say because their profile has to be done already. So yeah, whether someone internally on their team would do it, or help them with it with like a guided booklet. It's not going to be necessarily about the American Heart Association, but it's going to be about their love of giving back and charities and one of
Ah.
the interests, because you have that section on your profile that has interests.
Mm-hmm.
Really, one of the interests should be American Heart Association.
Oh, okay.
So the
That's a
way
good
that,
specific tip.
yeah, very specific.
Yeah.
One of the ways that the American Heart Association, for example, or any nonprofit can get their volunteers to share, we can do like a volunteer of the week or volunteer of the month that's highlighted on the company page. And this now is going to kind of go into, I know, there's a little inclusive marketing is going to be very important, especially with nonprofits. Now we want to make sure that we're highlighting everyone within the organization. So whether they're volunteers, whether they're members, anything else, because if you're looking to recruit more volunteers or you're looking to fundraise or you're looking to bring in more people with a diverse audience, you want to make sure that you're showing that diversity that's already going on within your organization.
Yes.
And you do that through your content.
Okay. That's, where my mind goes is so many organizations, nonprofits, do a newsletter, electronic or print, whatever. And there's sort of a spotlight section. So it sounds like a pretty easy thing to do would be to just take that, if you're doing that, and bring that onto LinkedIn as well.
Absolutely. Bring that onto LinkedIn. Something else that I've seen that's super, it's relatable. They do many interviews with them too. So clearly, just like we're doing an interview, it's from the comfort of your own home, but they do like a 90-second spot with them, almost like, why did you volunteer? What are you getting out of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Many testimonial being done right online. So it depends on your goals. So the biggest thing is to figure out what are your goals for your organization and how can you now use LinkedIn as a tool to make it happen.
Yeah. So when I teach marketing, I have the super simple method, the Claxon method, which starts with what does success look like?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your goals? And then who's the target audience? And then LinkedIn would be a how. So then it's how are you going to reach them? Do you think, what's your opinion? Obviously you're predisposed to being a fan of LinkedIn, but I'm curious, are there companies or organizations for whom like this just wouldn't be a fit? Like their audience isn't there? And so why bother optimizing?
Well, it's hard to name the company. I would say go to where your audience hangs out. Yeah. So if you understand who your potential clients are, your audience, then you're going to, you're going to focus on whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter. So I can't think of one right off the bat, but yeah, there's probably several.
Yeah.
Are not a good fit.
Mm-hmm. I'm sort of smirking because so I teach and, most of my students are a bit, they're younger, so more in the millennials, some Zoomers now. And whenever I talk about LinkedIn, they're like, oh, LinkedIn, like there's not a lot of enthusiasm. I'm like, here's the deal. Like the people who are going to think about hiring you, you may not love LinkedIn, but they're using it. So you kind of have to be there.
Right.
So I think LinkedIn is a bit unique in that way. It's like that overlap between personal, professional. In other instances, like if you don't like Facebook, don't be on Facebook. If you don't like Twitter, don't be on Twitter. Like nobody's forcing you to do these things. But there is a piece about LinkedIn, which is like, if your target audience is somebody who's going to be hiring you, then you need to be on LinkedIn. And then you need to listen to Deborrah, who's going to tell you how to optimize.
Absolutely. Yeah. They have to. So why do they groan about it? It's just because it's too boring for them?
That's for old people. Yeah, totally. They're like, oh, but because it's not where they naturally convene online.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're on Insta, they're on Snap.
Right.
They're on TikTok.
They don't realize though, they could make it fun. So they could go on LinkedIn and they can share just from a place of, this is how I use TikTok. This is how you can use TikTok. So they can go on there and they can now position themselves as like an expert on TikTok. And then an organization, maybe they're not even going to school for that, but who knows? An organization can pay them $100,000 a year just to tell them how to use TikTok.
So true. And so so I have a son who's 12,
Mm-hmm.
and he definitely is a pretty active TikTok user. But increasingly what he's using it for is to experiment with recipes.
Nice.
Right.
Wow.
And so I think
Wow.
this is fantastic. Of course, I love cooking, and just as I guess I mentioned that because people think of TikTok as like kind of patently silly. Like,
Right.
this is such a generational stereotypical thing.
Mm-hmm.
You Gen Xers and older are like, tick what? Kind of like, what? Why would
Why
you
would
yell
you do that?
that? But there is this, and I really appreciate you pointing out like where these things can converge in a
Mm-hmm.
really cool way, because I was a little reticent about TikTok, like, really, you're gonna spend your time doing TikTok videos? This is how that, okay. Mm. But one, it's kind of cute. I also have an almost 16-year-old daughter, and so and she's a dancer, so they'll make TikTok videos together.
Oh, that's
But
fun.
he is becoming a good little cook because
I
of
love
TikTok,
it.
right?
I love
So
it.
that's a silly example, but I really love this idea that you offered to, I'm thinking college age and whatever,
Yeah.
to like establish yourself. And if you had a specific area of expertise, you could
Mm-hmm.
blend the two. So if you're interested in environmental, issues, climate change or whatever, you could actually look for videos on TikTok about that and then bring that in. Oh, that's fun.
And your son, even now, let's get him to make money. Your son could now work with some food. We have that food as medicine type of companies, and they
Yeah.
could send, like, this is for me. When I was younger, I said I wanted to be a food critic so I can get free meals to write about. But so they could start to sponsor him, and they could send him food in order to do TikTok videos about. There's different things that you can do with it.
So many
But
different things.
yeah, but then he
Yeah.
would meet them either on Instagram or LinkedIn. So he would meet those people there, and then they would bring him in as an influencer, depending on how large his account is. So
Totally going to talk to him about this. He doesn't post as much. He's more like a consumer as
uh,
opposed to a producer. I will say, though, our family is pretty well known for our chocolate chip cookies. We make very good chocolate chip cookies.
nice.
And the evolution of that happened over the weekend because of TikTok, which it turns out you can put your cookie dough into the waffle maker.
I didn't
Uh-huh.
think about that, but you're right.
Oh, it's delicious.
Oh, now I'm gonna
Little
do
ice
that
cream on
today.
top on cheat day. Oh, I was like, oh, this is the best thing ever. So that
Wow.
gives you a lot of insight into our weekend. Now
Well,
that
I'm excited about that. I never thought about it, but yeah, waffle maker for sure.
waffle maker. And yeah, anyway, it's faster. There was a lot of perks to the waffle maker approach. We touched on this, but I want to make sure that we come back to it. And we're talking about it a little bit here, which is this idea of inclusion. We were
Mm-hmm.
just talking about it sort of in terms of age. But how can companies and organizations be more inclusive in their marketing in general,
Right.
and then in LinkedIn in particular?
Yeah, I think the big thing, and obviously with everything going on with a bigger focus now on diversity and inclusion, because it was always there, but it's really urgent for companies now. I think the importance is, and this can be all around the LinkedIn profile and your presence. There's a difference between, and I've seen this on Instagram, which makes me cringe a little bit. It's not necessarily putting my face on one of your LinkedIn or Instagram posts when you don't necessarily know me and it's not relevant. But it's about having that conversation about why it's important to you, and maybe even admitting that in the past, this wasn't something that you thought about. And yes, I've messed up and we overlooked it, but this is how we are working at this point in order to make sure that things change. It's going to be important, especially if we think about nonprofits and recruiting the right board members,
Mm-hmm.
whether
Yeah.
for organizations and recruiting VPs. Because if now they go to your profile, just your social media presence in general, LinkedIn or anywhere else, and they don't see anything that speaks to them, or they don't see people that look like them, then either when they get in that interview, they will be hammering you with questions, or they may not want to even, be associated at all.
Yeah. It's not going to feel authentic.
No,
Like, you
no,
can't just write an, diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, put it on your website, and then say like, look,
we have it there.
we
It's
have
yeah,
it there. I
yeah.
really appreciate your point about boards of directors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But also, I hope that listeners and viewers will really hear your point about owning the messing up that may have happened in the past.
Right.
We can't, revisionist history isn't going to serve us going forward. And and this loops back to a theme that's been kind of coming up and what you're saying around being human, and humans fail. And
Absolutely.
that's super scary. And yet, if we're going to move forward and you're truly going to be inclusive, that's a bit of bravery that has to happen,
Right.
I think.
And it's almost like a sales and marketing call. When we think about sales and a sales call, they're probably thinking about it already. You've never talked about this in the past. How do I know this is something different? So why not address it right now? So now any objections they possibly have, you're just putting it out on the table, and people appreciate that.
They do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's scary. Get it. I mean, speaking as a white woman, yes, have messed up a
Right.
lot. Also, when it comes to marketing, and there's been a couple other podcasts about this, just being so mindful of the implicit bias that you bring.
Right.
And if
Yeah.
you're not aware of it and you can't name it, then just the way that marketing, the like behemoth machine of marketing is structured right now, you really risk perpetuating dominant paradigms.
Absolutely.
So you have to be so proactive about it, but it's really doable. But it's that intentionality out of the gate and that owning the stuff. Like, I mean, I've talked
Yeah.
about this on other podcasts, but I teach this graduate marketing course, and a couple of years ago, one of my students, God bless her, said, "Hey, I know that you really care about diversity. I can feel that. And have you looked at the authors on the reading list?
Oh, wow. Even
They're
the
all
little
white."
things are so, yes.
I get like choked up every time I tell that story because it was a moment, and I had to say, no, I didn't see it. Thank you.
But I'm so glad that you are a person that they completely trust, that they could come to you with that.
Oh, such a blessing. Oh, my students are blessings in every way. I had
Yeah.
this. So speaking of inclusion, I want to be mindful of time and your time and listeners' time and viewers' time. But quickly, pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't intending to go here, but I think it feels related to me, which is we're having like, an evolution of, with they being a singular pronoun.
Right.
And that actually that's more inclusive than it used to be you had to pick he, she, them. And then there was the S// HE kind
Right.
of
Right.
middle ground thing that happened for a while. And
Right.
as a writer, I'm like, oh my gosh, they is finally a singular pronoun. It's like, yay. But it's little things like that.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about like on LinkedIn profiles, just that attentiveness to the pronouns that you're using can also speak to like, I'm trying. I get
Exactly.
it. I'm trying.
Yeah. Yeah. And it should,
Yes.
and as you said before, it should be authentic. So don't do it if it doesn't feel authentic to you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.
Because there
Yeah.
are people for a variety of reasons, if we just stick with the pronoun example, they're like, I can't do it. They is plural. It's never going to be singular for me. Oh, but what made me think about that is I had a student a couple of years ago. All my students are such gifts. I learned so much from them. And she was she was so lovely and gracious about, she'd come up after class and be like, that was great. I learned, I love this. I just thought I'd flag for you. There was a lot of gendered, language today. And here's an example. And here's how in the future you might change that.
That's amazing.
But it's amazing that she took the time and
Right.
she was willing. Oh, amazing. So I'm super blessed that way that I have my students who like.
Absolutely. But yeah, like I said, that speaks volumes about who you are too, that
Well,
they feel comfortable doing that.
that's thank you. I appreciate that. All right. We've talked about a lot of different things. So what's one action that you would recommend that people take?
If you still have that blue default banner on your LinkedIn profile, change it today. Find something that, yeah. That's
so
what
true.
action. Yeah. And if not, if you're already past the second step, then just this week work on optimizing or just making your LinkedIn profile more of a reflection of who you are and where you're going.
Yeah, that little bit of bravery.
Yeah,
We need human. Now more than ever, we need human, right?
absolutely.
So I close every single interview with the same question. which is about inspiration and motivation. So the etymology of the word inspiration means to give breath, and then motivation is about action. So we need inspiration to take action. So Deborah, what inspires you and what motivates you to keep doing this work?
What inspires me, and I never thought about it this way before, but what inspires me are people who are ready to give up that we may not have even met before, but something that we say or something that we do, specifically on the online space, creates this different world for them where they want to try again.
Wow.
So that inspires me to keep on going. And what motivates me daily is, I don't know, I just love what I do. I just love what I do. The feedback that I get from people, the lives that, and I never necessarily think that I'm changing lives, but the worlds that I'm changing and the conversations that are changing based on what I put out there.
Yeah. And the perspectives that are changing.
Yeah.
And the access that you create and the connections that you create. Yeah. I think that's world changing.
Yeah.
According to me. Thank you, Deborah, so much for being here. Deborah, AKA the LinkedIn Black Belt. Folks, of course, you can find her on LinkedIn for sure. I so appreciate you being here today. I learned a ton. So thank you. It was like a mini masterclass for all of us. So appreciate you being here. Appreciate what you're doing and what you're sharing. You were very generous with your knowledge with all of us. So thank you. And of course, listeners and viewers, thank you for being here. And as always, do good, be well, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Erica. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Deborah. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Marketing for Good podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, review, and share on Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like more information about Claxon University, how to make more impact in and for your organization, or hiring me to speak or coach, go to claxonmarketing.com or reach out at info@claxonmarketing.com. Again, thanks for listening, and thanks for making our world a better place.